welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, the NBC network, with your host, Hurricane H. New day, new show, an awesome discussion today, an awesome guest, someone who's done radio, TV, comedy, a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about empowerment. We're going to talk about just different things that can help us in life, and from a perspective of someone who's lived different things and is aiming at providing certain information to people to guide them through his writing. And really, it's about inspiration today. So, one thing about this particular person is that he's been living in a lot of different places. And today, we're talking to him from. I usually have someone from the land down under. This is like beyond that, New Zealand. All right. So, without any further ado, I have with me Dick Wybrow, and he is a Canadian author. That's his background. He is novels. He's set in the US. He grew up as a former stand-up comedian, as I said, and he does a lot of good stuff. So today we're going to have some fun with him. Dick, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. And I welcome you to Auckland, New Zealand, where it is actually kind of chilly. It's 18 degrees today, which doesn't mean a lot to many people in North America at all. But what I'll do is, so if nothing else, because everybody comes to Hurricane H for, the fun of the show and the inspiration of that, I'm going to give you a little bit of knowledge. We're going to start off with this, right? So if you ever hear Celsius and go, I don't know what that means. So here we go. So what I'll do is, so right now my computer tells me it's 18 degrees Celsius. Now, if you want to get a little trick to be able to get in your head about what that is in Fahrenheit, and I've been here for 10 years and I still do this, is double that number and add 30, and that gives you approximately what the temperature is. So 18 degrees, double that, 36, add 30, 66. So basically it's about 66 degrees. Now, it's not perfect, but you'll sound like you kind of know what you're talking about. If your friend, from other parts of the world, Canadians or whatever it might be, say, oh, it's 15 degrees. Ooh, that sounds a bit chilly. You should put a coat on. And they'll be really impressed because you did that quick little math in your head, 15, 30, 60. Yeah. So there you go. So starting off with some learning. Providing a service already from down under, down under.
I like that. So double down under. All right. Okay. We can use that next time.
Double it at 30 and you're golden. Yep. And give you a bit of an idea. Give a bit of an idea about that.
Just a quick question. I mean, I know New Zealand is known as the Kiwi land. So anything to expand on that one?
It's funny because I grew up with a Kiwi father. And Kiwi white boys they don't express their emotions. They don't. I'm generalizing here, of course. There are different folks, but I'm just saying, especially if a certain age group, they don't say what's on their mind, and so there are a lot of times you feel like you're sort of just pulling stuff out of them, trying to work out what's going on inside their heads. But that I always thought it was me growing up, because we do that, right? As kids, like, why is my father the way he is towards me? And I came here and went, oh, there's a whole country full of my fathers. This is exactly how some of these folks are. But Kiwis are very, very kind people. I mean, obviously, the country's beautiful. You've seen it in all the Lord of the Rings movies and all that, and they are pretty tired of being compared to the Lord of the Rings movies, to be honest. So don't necessarily bring that up with Kiwis. And it's kind of a fun dynamic if you want a little bit of it. There's plenty of state rivalries. Like I grew up, for the most part, born in Canada, but I grew up in Minnesota, and so we always had a bit of a rivalry with like Iowa or Wisconsin. There's a little bit of that feeling in a way, or maybe there's a bit of like a U.S. Canada thing between here and Australia. Australians are way more aggressive about it. Kiwis are quite passive about that. So Australians will just taking swings at Kiwis, and they're like, Kiwis not so much, they're kind of casual with the whole thing. Like, oh, it's interesting you feel that way, which kind of describes, the way Kiwis are.
Oh, thank you. Well, listen, cultures, right? Different perspectives of life, different things. So, we do have that thing, Canada, US, you have all, those dynamics. It is what it is. It's just part of life. Well, thank you for that. So go ahead. You want to say something?
Well, I was going to say, there's also a fascinating thing. We're talking about empowerment, and we're talking about, attitudes with other people. There's something here that I don't think most North Americans would have heard of. I heard a bit of it growing up some. Is there something called tall poppy? And it's worth Googling or something and looking around. It's a fascinating dynamic to be involved with. Apparently, there's a version of this in Japan, too. I don't know what they call it there. But tall poppy here is this sort of evening out. And there's some positives and some negatives to it. But this idea of you don't want to rise too high, or you don't want to see yourself as too above other people, or that, you're doing great or whatever it might be, because that actually puts a lot of people off. Where in the US, if you kind of build yourself up a bit, people look at it and go like, yeah, I kind of want to be like that. I want to, like, I'm, looking up to Hurricane H or whatever it might be. Where here, there's a bit of this, like, don't think too highly of yourself. And that's a fascinating culture to kind of sort of import yourself into, coming from North America, because we do what we can to kind of build ourselves up a bit to tackle the world. And there's a fair bit of, encouraging other people to do great too. You see somebody doing great and that can be inspiring. Here, to some extent, when somebody's doing great, they're like, he's all right. And so it's a fascinating dynamic, and you have to learn how to navigate that. And it was difficult for me, especially in the beginning, because, like you said, I've been in television, which is kind of a bit of a noisy sort of profession, and doing my work as an author, where you come up, hey, this is a great book, come read this book. When you express that sort of thing, the Kiwis are like, it might be great. Whereas, North Americans and even Aussies to some extent, they say, yeah, okay, I'll check it out. So yeah, it's fascinating. We all speak English, but we don't necessarily speak the same language, if I can say it that way.
That's actually pretty interesting, because that is a fact. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can be in the same state, you can be in the same town, you can be the same family, and you may still not speak the same language as you describe it there. I mean, yeah, the how we communicate may be the same, but what we intend and how we take it is different. That's just how it is. People are different.
That's the challenge of communication. We always talk, like, if I'm speaking with you, speaking to my wife, or if I'm speaking with my coworkers back when I was in television, we always think about, this is how I express myself. But really, obviously, communication is between two people. And as best as you can, you have to understand the ways that the other person's going to hear you. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo in expressing it, but that is so valuable to understand that. Understanding how, like, when you're trying to get something across, or trying to explain something, or just trying to have a conversation, if you're not listening to how the other person is receiving what you're saying, then you will find that conversation very difficult, or you'll find it very difficult to get your ideas across to somebody else. And it's really difficult in the sense that when we're speaking and communicating, we think about communicating as us expressing ourselves, and it's 50%. Communicating is also hearing them and understanding where they're coming from. And sometimes that's the hardest thing about communicating, is just shutting up and listening to the other person speak.
Listen, that is a fact. And as a matter of fact, I mean, my 30 years plus in the healthcare, I was more on the sales side of the insurance space. And, sales, we're known to be more talkative than quiet. But in essence, the way we're trained is the opposite, is that you talk less, you listen more, because you want to get all the information to be able to assist, right, and provide whatever services for your clients and customers. So it's just a dynamic that people don't get as much. And you're right, you cannot be busy talking; you have to be busy listening, or active listening is key. I mean, when you do this, I mean, you've been in television, you interview people, so you know how that goes. When you and I are talking, your mind is repeating the stuff that you stated, so I can refer back to the stuff. And if I'm not really listening to you, it's a problem. I've been told that I kind of recap things, because, and that's the reason I do that, is just like, I'm taking all the information and kind of breaking it down, and maybe sometimes I'm giving my own flavor, but really that's what it is. Now, if you're not listening, you can't keep up. I mean, you're just going to be like a little blind and you just keep going. So it changes the dynamics, how you communicate people. And that's probably one of the biggest problems that exist between humans, just how we communicate with each other, and whether it's about us or it's about them. And that's the other thing. Like, is it about you? Is it about them? Yeah, you have to present a perspective, and kind of send in a message, but at the same time, you want to see, like, who's receiving that message. The message could be the same, but it has to be perceived differently by other people. And it's really what they hear, not what you say. And that's the other thing. You got to be careful about it. Now, again, same thing here, whether we do this on audio, video, or in person. It's a big deal. In the corporate is a big deal. In the person is a big deal. I mean, relationships, forget about it. You're an author also. I mean, when you write stuff, that's the other thing. You're speaking, you communicate in a different way. There's a lot of underlying stuff. There's a lot of messaging. There's a lot of, things that you're conveying through your script, and it's an important piece. This could be a show on its own. I mean, communication and discussion, how to convey things, is just a big deal. And we've had a few shows about how to master communication, and whether in the corporate world and things like that. And we hear it all the time. Things get lost in translation. People get excited. I hear what I hear. All these things are real. It's just amazing how it works.
And you can win people over. Like we were saying a moment ago, talking about listening. I've talked about this with other folks. Because I've coached talent in the past, and there's something, especially people who are kind of entertainers, people that might be musicians, whatever. Sometimes they feel as though they have to carry the responsibility of a conversation, right? But like I said, I've coached talent and just regular people. Just if you go to a party, you go to an event, or you just go somewhere where there's other people around, experiment with it. Try this one time. It's a bit of a Dale Carnegie thing in a way, but try this one time. Just ask questions of the other person, and you'll be shocked. If you just be interested, be connected to that person. They say something, respond to what they said, and continue to ask questions, or at least just being genuinely interested. You should be interested. And you will find that you walk away from that. And if the other person talks about you, they go, they have an amazing conversation. That you might have not said anything about yourself the whole time, but you were there and connected with them. I remember many years ago when I was in radio, Bill Clinton had come out. He was, just been president a couple of years earlier. He came out and he was speaking at an event. And every time he spoke to somebody, and you've probably heard this sort of thing in the past, but other people, when he would speak to somebody after his big presentation, he'd sit there and talk to somebody one-on-one. And when he was there talking with them, he was locked onto them, locked on. He wasn't looking around the room. He was listening to what they're saying. And they may say something like, yeah, I grow flowers part of time. What kind of flowers? I love flowers. That flowers are the greatest thing in the world. You look like the kind of person that can make some pretty amazing flowers. He was just locked into them. And every person that walked away was just grinning ear to ear. And they felt like they were the most important person in the room for that 5 or 10 minutes. And, I don't know how much of that was putting on a bit of a show, but that person felt really great about themselves afterwards. So it showing a genuine interest in somebody also opens them up to whatever you might have to communicate as well. So it's worth playing around with that a bit. And I don't mean in an insincere way. I mean in a genuinely sincere way. But if you're trying to connect with somebody, if you find like a coworker or a friend or whatever it might be, a neighbor, whatever, you find that you can't seem to really connect with them. Sometimes you just kind of quiet it down and just try and find out a bit more about them, and that opens those doors.
And really, I love. By the way, that was a good impression. That was a good one. That was a good one. Yeah, I think I'm gonna test you out with your comedian, personality right now. Maybe throw out some comedy in here. But that was true. I mean, you're right. When you speak to someone, and by the way, this goes for leadership, this goes for personal, this goes for anybody, interviews, and yes, sometimes it could even be a show. But it's not the context is one thing, the scenario is one thing, but really what the people feel is what matters, and that's all there is. Even these shows, when we put them together, I mean, the idea is that we want the message to be for people so they can feel righteous about it and they can get something out of it. This is not, I mean, we don't know who's listening. We know that there's an audience, but at the same time, you want to make sure that whoever's listening is getting, the good stuff from here. Now, ultimately, if you're from someone, you want them to feel the greatest thing, and because it doesn't work if I'm talking to you. It's funny. I had an interview one time, and this president of this health plan, was asking questions. It was for a role in leadership, and he, in the whole interview, he was not really, stable with me. He was all over the place.
Right.
Now, people are going to be like, what kind of CEO? I don't want to get you guys to where, but that was just a part of his test to see how I am as a candidate and as a person, whether I'm following. And we have not talked in the whole, almost 90% of the interview. There was nothing about, the work and the business. It was just about me, about the world, about things. And he would get distracted a little bit. He'll talk about side. We talk about maps. We talk about my original land. It was just all of it. And eventually I realized, like, what, that was an interesting style to really get your presence and gauge my reaction to him. And of course I got the job, but that's another story. That was good.
Right.
But he was an interesting person, and I loved his style because he was very down to earth, CEO, and he was in the trenches with people. He would come in, and he knew everybody by name. I mean, it was just a different personality. But his style on how stuff, was just different. Now, when he talked to you, he really talked to you. But in the interview, it was kind of like interesting. Like for someone who has not experienced that, I'd be like, "What the hell is this? What kind of interview?" Is this? I'm here for the job, and this dude is talking about everything else but the job. He's not even interested in that. And it was an interest, but he was not. For him, it was just like, what kind of character are you to join his team?
Sure.
That's it. And then then he felt good with you, then that's, the other team, the other immediate, I guess, leadership will have that decision, but not him. But his input will be based on his, I guess, assessment of your personality. So that was a cool thing. But, again, this is a great world. I mean, when, you master some of these techniques in different ways, you can change the dynamics of things and really make people feel good about themselves eventually. So that's a good thing. Well, so you know what? Since I'm at it, let's do some, comedy thing, because I know you've spent some time about comedy. It's fascinating. You in the comedy world, you can stand in front of people and just turn, that whole room, with laughter from nothing. I mean, you can pick on anyone.
I did. Yeah, I did stand-up comedy, especially in the beginning. I did stand-up. One of my first jobs was stand-up comedian, which seems like a really bad idea as your first gig, But what had happened was I was actually at the time writing little short stories and vignettes and things like that. I was sending things out to various magazines to get published. But this is back in the day before the internet.
Oh, wow.
This is back.
Not too far back.
Early days, man. So this was like early 90s. And so what you used to have to do is you'd write yourself a short story or whatever it was, and then you would send it off to some magazine, right? And it would take months to hear back. It was insane. Take months to hear back. And not only did it take months to hear back, is it required you to put inside the envelope what is called an SASE, a self-addressed stamped envelope. So you would put a stamp on that envelope and you'd write your address on there so that when that rejection finally came, you paid for the stamp. That's what that came down to. And it was a challenge to be able to do that. And so somehow in my head, it made sense to me that if I wanted to get published, quote unquote, air quotes, if I want to get published, I could just write something, then go on stage and I'm presenting it to a bunch of people. It's published in a way. Yeah, that's published. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go up and do like stories. Here's my 500-word story about some science fiction thing or fantasy thing, whatever it might be. I had to instead sort of do vignettes about life or whatever it might be. But it was still storytelling, and so I did that for like the first 2 or 3 years. Across the Midwest, and I did early days of doing that 5-minute set where you do and open a show. I did middling, I did some headlining. And then from there, I arced into doing radio because I couldn't see myself, because I wasn't one of those people that loved doing stand-up comedy. I loved getting laughs. I liked the creation side of it. I didn't like the driving around. So radio became that sort of thing where you could kind of do this. You got a new material every day, but you've got your audience. And so stand-up was a natural progression to get into radio. And I loved radio. I had a great time doing radio, especially in the mid-90s, early 90s, and that. It was an amazing time. Mid-90s to about 2003 or so, I did radio, and it was an amazing time for radio. It was really a lot of fun. And it was just a little bit like podcasting in a way. There's an amazing, because you listening right now is just you listening to this. It's not like the 1950s where there's a family sitting around an old Phil Cove radio listening to Milton Berle. It's a very one-on-one relationship. Television, it's not like that. A lot of times there's a number of people in the room watching TV or whatever it might be. But radio and podcasting is a very one-on-one relationship with the listener. And that's an amazingly beautiful and powerful experience. I loved radio for that. It was a great time. It was a really great time in that medium. I had a lot of fun.
And it was talk radio, right? Just, different.
It was both. And so I did some, what we call FM talkers. I did some of that. I did rock radio. But even with rock radio and something called adult contemporary and, CHR and album oriented rock and stuff like that, the stuff that I did was between the songs. And so I started doing mornings. The very first gig I had was mornings. In a little town called El Dorado Springs, Missouri, 2 hours south of Kansas City. And I was living up in Minneapolis at the time. I'd gone to a trade school for radio. And I went down there, I got the gig, and this place was so small that I actually had to go in and turn the radio station on in the morning. That's how tiny it was. And it was like this old converted farmhouse. And every morning I'd walk in, and no joke, because I'd start at 5 a.m. and there would be cows in the neighboring farm to the farmhouse. And they got used to me being there in the morning. And so I'd walk by, and the cows would eventually kind of come up and it got to the point where after a couple of weeks, they were just there waiting for me. And it was like, no autographs, cows, as I'm coming up. And it was fun because so the next farm over abutted right up to the little, like I said, there was a farmhouse converted into a radio station. And I remember being on the air at one point and doing my thing, and it was really, small town radio was really fun. And so I'm sitting there, but then I just had this sort of eerie sort of feeling like, I know I'm the only person in the building right now, but I feel like I'm being watched. And sure enough, I took a look and there was a gap in the blinds. And I took a look and there's this cow eye staring at me through the blinds. So I was being watched by the cows. But no, that was an amazing experience. I loved that. I love doing radio, as I said.
That's an interesting. That's fun, man. Well, you mentioned something about podcasts and radio. I mean, radio is the core, and podcast, I guess, is just a derivative of it. I mean, it is radio in a different angle. That's all. It just more, I guess, accessible to more talent and more people that may not be. I mean, not everybody can be on the regular radio. There's enough. There's not enough for everyone. I guess spots on the radio. Podcast opens it to everyone that has the talent, the ability to go on
Well,
and
but
create
keep in mind, I think one of the fallacies that people have with the radio is this idea like what you're doing right now, Hurricane. You could easily be on the radio. People have this idea that that person on the radio is so much better than I am. That's not the case. It really isn't, and I can say that after I've been in radio for a decade. What it is they. And not in an evil way, but they knew people, they went through the system and they got themselves into a position where they end up getting the gig. Now, yes, there are a lot of skills to it, and those are all skills for most part you can learn. Like, I don't know how many times when I went from that little station in El Dorado to Clinton, Missouri, which is a big 100,000 watt radio station, to Orlando, to Pensacola, to Southern California, just outside of LA, and then I'm going to major market in Atlanta, where, I mean, that's huge. That's the biggest market you can get to, and the boards in front of you got bigger and bigger and bigger. So all the little dials and everything, you had to move around.
I got a board, but not that big.
but I remember the first 2 or 3 times I went to different stations, I was like, I'll never be able to learn this. And after a while, just like, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same concepts, but really beyond just understanding. And this probably works in other sort of industries as well. It was just sort of being in the right place at the right time, making those connections, having some good tape, and moving yourself up. In fact, I remember, as a quick aside, one of the great things I got to do in rock radio was interview all these sort of old school rockers and stuff. And there's a band called Aerosmith, which a number of people of a certain age probably know, and the lead singer, Steven Tyler. He was talking about, and this was 2001, 2002. So been a number of years since they had a monster hit, but they were still doing really well in the stadiums and that sort of thing. But I remember him saying, and it's something that stuck with me because I felt the same thing, I guess I said about radio, because I was talking about the immense success because they've been going since the 70s. So 30 years, they're still hanging around. And his line to me was, we got lucky. He said, we were not the best band to come out of Boston. We weren't even in the top 50. We were just sort of in the right place, the right time. Yeah, we had some really good songs, but so does everybody else. And so his thing was like that nature of like, he thought in some ways, and I agree with it, that you can create some of your luck. There's some element that you can kind of sort of create scenarios to help bring the luck in or whatever it might be. And you might use luck in different ways. And some people might say God instead of luck, whatever it might be. But he was saying, listen, we weren't the best to come out of the city. We just had some good breaks. And that's why we are as big as we are. And I think that's something the older rockers would say, not the younger ones so much. When you speak to the younger rockers, they're convinced they're the best thing in the world. But after a couple of years, after a couple of decades in the industry, he was really comfortable and really felt that the reason his great success and stardom came from just happenstance in some cases.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, that's a great segue to some of the discussion about just empowerment and inspiration and I mean, he is humble. I mean, I know that for a fact. I mean, he's, when you get a certain point, you know who you are, your presence, stuff, but you also know what it took to be there. And
Sure.
And I think for our audiences, any aspiring people out there, whatever you want to be in life, especially if you want to be in, I guess, entertainment or radio, TV or movies, whatever it is, or business, career path, success, that's the thing. Like, people sometimes are out there trying their best and nothing happens for them, and they're like, what the hell's going on? And you have others where things just move out quickly. And yeah, to your point, there is that word we use, luck. I mean, I personally don't prescribe to luck specifically, but I prescribe to the concept that I even say there is no such thing as a the right place, the right time. I mean, actually, the wrong place, the wrong time. I do prescribe to the idea of the right place, the right time. That's exactly what happens. You
Right.
happen to be a certain place, a certain time, and things happen. But here's the key, right? If they didn't start, if they didn't put out, some music out there, no one would have known about them. But they were doing it. Persistence, is key. Resilience is key. Ambition is part of that. You don't give up. You make it happen, and you stay up with it. That's all there is. Like every success story, there's a lot of failures before the success, but they don't stop. They continue, and I think that's really the same generic formula for everyone. And sometimes people get to the point where like, oh, I'm giving up on me. I mean, I'm doing the best I can. I think I'm good, but nothing is going on here. I'm not making it. I'm not catching a break, as they say, right? The break will come. You just got to keep at it. I mean, that's the thing. I think we all have that moment with like doubt. This is it. I mean, no matter what I do, I go left, I go right. I don't see it, and other people are just making charts and making it happen. What's going on? It goes for a career path in a corporate. It goes for a business. It goes for anything that you aspire for and you really want out there. But that's the fact. I mean, in the example you gave, they put in some. Obviously, they got some good music, but like you said, a lot of people have good music, but some make it, some
Yep.
don't. But there's different circumstances. Sometimes, we hear stories. I mean, for example, Elvis. I mean, he's the first guy that wanted to produce him. Didn't see the talent that others saw in him, and ultimately regretted. I mean, the movie's it's still out on Netflix, I think. And again, I mean that's the story depicted on the movie style. But the fact is, those I see them repeat themselves over and over, and you just have to keep up until you find someone who sees your talent. I mean, Walt Disney, had the same thing. He was like lacking imagination. Imagine that.
Right.
Oprah. She had her own problems with the media. Oh, she's not qualified. She can't do this. And yet, look at her. She is one of the best and running a huge network. So that those things are important to people to hear, and thank you for bringing that up, because I think some people can be like, oh, listen, it's even as simple as this. You hear this, you get remotivated, because sometimes we lose that motivation. Like, I don't know what, this is not happening. We're going to talk about books. That's the same thing. You're right. The first book, we know how it's going to play. You keep up, things happen, right? Now, of course, there's marketing, there's strategy, there's other things, how you promote yourself, get yourself a right, path, whatever. There's a lot of things to do, but it takes time, like everything else. You got to build it up. It's not overnight. There's no overnight success, and that's key. So,
If you, I mean, and that's the thing, the first, I've actually got a very good friend who's like a New York Times bestselling author. And he always says the first three books I wrote were published by Kinko's, meaning that he went and he just went to the copy store, printed them out, and he couldn't sell them. And so it was like maybe the third or fourth book before somebody got interested. And his story is fascinating because he actually sent it out to all these different publishers. His agent did. He was able to get an agent, and they just didn't want it. And then just a moment of luck happened for him where some production company optioned his book. And all that means is a production company, a TV or film, they take a look at the book and then go like, you know what, we'll give you a couple of dollars. We want the option to buy it. So they just go to hold it in a way for like 90 days, 6 months or a year, whatever it might be. They don't give you necessarily a lot of money, but they give you this option. Well, so the smart agent went to these publishing companies, said, hey, listen, these folks over here, they option the book. They might turn it into something. So you probably want to get on board with this, because if we do sign a TV or movie deal, it'll be too expensive for you. So go ahead and publish it now. And so she was smart. So the agent, she used this to get him published on this site. Now the option expired. They never did turn that into a film. They never turned that into a movie. But it was just taking that chance and going out there, like we're talking about luck. Yeah, it was a moment of luck, but that moment of luck that his agent did, she sought that out, right? She sought all these different places out. Even when she got no's from all the publishers, she was like, well, let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. And she got a little in, and she got a little crack in the door, then took that moment and went back to the publishers and was able to get a deal out of it. And I think that's what you have to look for. As best you can, you just got to keep plugging away at it. I wrote 2/3 of a series that I got optioned for. Unfortunately, my agent I had at the time wasn't interested in going to the publishers because he was old. And he was just like, well, let's see if they can turn it into something. It's like, well, why don't you do what my buddy did? He's like, no. And that ended up expiring, and those books didn't get published. And it wasn't until I remember I was coming home. I was working at CNN at the time. I was working as a television producer. And I came home and I was sort of in a bit of a crabby mood because at that time there was the 50 Shades of Grey was doing really well.
Uh-huh.
And I'd never read it at the time, but all these people were talking about, well, this is a huge book and it's selling millions of copies. I also heard all the stories about how terrible the book was, how terribly it was written. And so in a bit of a jaded way, I said, you know what? I should do a zombie book based on that, because there was a bit of a thing of mashups at the time, like Pride and Prejudice and zombies. And so I made this joke with her saying, what if I do 50 Shades of Grey Matter, because zombies eat brains? And so she goes, yeah, you should write that. That one might sell. And I was like, all right. And so anyways, I did. I wrote it for the heck of it. And so this was 2012, and I wrote it in 5 parts. And self-publishing was sort of coming into its own on Amazon. And I loaded it up in September of 2012 on Amazon, the first book. It was, like I said, I did it like a serial sort of thing, 80 pages a piece, whatever it might be. Put it up, didn't think much of it. I did book 2, didn't think much of it. But as I was just about to kind of hit publish on book 3 of 5, the reviews started to come in on book 1. And then I went back and took a look. Like, hey, I've sold a number of copies of it. I only sold it for like $1.99 or something. But by December of that year, it became the #1 comedy book on Amazon. It just sort of hit a bit of a chord, and it was something that I never would have considered doing. It was sort of a bit of a goofy sort of, like I said, it had nothing at all to do with 50 Shades of Grey because I never read the book, but it was just this fun little story about these guys end up taking on zombies, and it really sort of hit a bit of a chord, and it was humor. And that was something, I guess, the biggest takeaway from that, other than a nice little check from Amazon, which was nice. But the biggest takeaway from that was I had a bit of a humor background. The 2 books, the 2/3 of a series I wrote, the one that I got optioned for was sort of like this police thriller sort of style. And the one negative part about a huge production company optioning the book, in fact, later on, that group was called Circle of Confusion. They're still around. They're the ones that produced Walking Dead many years later. So these guys, they had some clout to them. But the problem in some way is getting that option convinced me I was on the right track. And so that's when I ended up writing the second book. And then I had a bit of a come to Jesus with myself, and I'm not really enjoying this much. I'm sort of writing in a prescriptive manner. But when I started writing more the humor stuff, which was my background, stuff I enjoyed doing, I was having fun with the writing, and that came across. And so that creative way, I always feel that when somebody is enjoying their creative output, that comes out in the art they're creating. For as much as I would say the stuff I was writing was art because it was a zombie book, but people responded to that. And I've found that with my writing, if I'm enjoying the process, I to some extent, I have to take that and go, that's enough for me. If I'm enjoying what I'm doing, if I don't sell more than a book or 2, I enjoyed that process. And to me, that's a win. And that's kind of a mentality, especially early on with my writing, that kind of saved my head a bit, because you can really do your noggin in by sitting there looking at the sales or the page reads or why aren't people getting into my book. Eventually you build into that. But if you're thinking about right now, you think I want to finish my book, or I put a book out, or I've always wanted to write a book, write it for yourself is my advice. And a lot of people have different. Write it for yourself as like, this is something that I would like to see. And then get a professional editor. That's a big thing. You really do need to have somebody properly edit it. I learned that the hard way, but have that thing professionally edited and put it out. And if it doesn't become a bestseller, because most of them never do, then you can be proud. Look, I've written a book. Because you tell somebody I've written a book, they're like, oh, I've always wanted to do that. You've written a book? He said, yeah, I've written 13. Like, I've written 13 books. I was like, yeah, I don't know how I did it, but that's just kind of what happened. And it wasn't, so I did one series to give you a little bit of the path. So I wrote this Hell Inc. series. And I've written 8 or 9 of those books. And then I started this new series called Kane, which for people watching the video can see it behind me. It's kind of a werewolf book, but not really. It's a humor book. And it's about sort of the found family sort of style. But I put that out there. And because I had another 9 books there behind me at some point where I'd written these books, I got better. I got better at writing, and I got better at presenting myself, and I'd build up a bit of an audience. So when my book ended up coming out, the first book ended up coming out in September, it did really, really well from the get-go. So much so that Podium Audio came along to, hey, listen, we want to turn these into audiobooks. I earned all that to some extent. I earned all that because of all the years, literal years I put in to becoming better at the craft and understanding how the dynamics of publishing work in some small way in independent publishing. So it takes, the overnight success can take a decade. It just takes a lot of work to get there.
Well, thank you. And you again, you touching on powerful stuff, because for everyone that's watching and listening, I mean, we're talking in the context of writing books or writing, but writing, career path, sports, all of it, movies, acting, singing, podcasting, no matter what you do, do it for the pleasure, for loving the stuff that you do. And don't worry about the ratings. The ratings will come. People will eventually get to you. And you're right, because we get disappointed very quickly. I put all this work and I put it up there. Nobody's watching and listening. I mean, today, on the social media world, right? It's all about followers and counts and who's viewing stuff, who's liking or shares. And you get some people get frustrated, like, I'm putting stuff, nothing's going on. All it's gonna take is someone to see a clip, a video of a stuff, and then share that enough, and you'll get the hits, but don't do it for the hits. Do it for the mission, for whatever that you believe in. If you do it right, it will get there. It's amazing. That's all there is. And in the writing, as you said, you put the stuff out, you loved it. It wasn't for the sales. Listen, there's nothing wrong with making the moolah out of your work. That's actually good, because it keeps you going, because not everything's not free this world, right? So you got to do your thing. But, if you have the passion for things, just pursue it. And you're right. Things are going to happen. And even if the satisfaction, like, I'm happy, I don't care, I put a book out, and just for the success and of the achievement itself, that, hey, I am a book writer, that's something, check mark. I get out of my list, right? And
I'll tell you, because you mentioned this idea of, like, you need, like, a lot of followers. You need a lot of people talking about you, whatever it might be. Especially with Kane, that this new series has brought in readers that don't know my old stuff. They only know me for this. And so I've got, maybe a good number of thousands of people that have purchased the book or downloaded the book. And that's not millions of people, right? It's pretty good money. It's enough to at least for the time being, keep the mortgage, but it's not millions of people. But I tell you what, one thing about the books, and a number of people have said, like, I've never read anything quite like this, because I don't write in a formula. I just write these characters from the heart. And people really enjoy it. And I've had a good number of people say, I've never laughed out loud with a book as much as I have with this one. They love the storyline and this relationship between Kane, who's this 6'7" French Canadian that used to be a wolf, but ended up getting bit by this soldier, this infected soldier. And the next day he wakes up, he was a wolf at the time. He wakes up as a human. And then now in the moonlight, he comes out when there's a full moon, he turns into a werewolf. But here's the thing. So as a creator, it was like, I don't want it just to be, because I'm selfish. I don't want it to just be when the full moon comes out, then he turns into a werewolf. I was like, why is it that it's just the full moon? There's other phases of the moon. Why isn't, like, the person that turns into a werewolf, why doesn't that affect them? So I started to think, well, what if it was lesser phases of a moon? What if he was affected by that? What might he turn into? And then the answer was dogs, because dogs are lesser wolves in some way. And so I'll put it in sort of a very caustic way, maybe in a selfish way, that I wanted to have more fun while writing. I decided that when there's, like, a lesser moon phase, that he turns into dogs. And so it's an unusual, fun sort of story, but I did that because I wanted to have fun in writing the story. That wasn't something like, oh, I've got to have this moment, I've got to create this character needs to do this. It wasn't like that. It wasn't prescriptive like that. It was like, I want to write a fun story, a story that I want to read. And the benefit of that, I'll say, from my perspective, is that in creating a bit of a fun story where, sort of anything goes, but within, there's a plot and character development, all this. In doing that and really loving the story and putting together, other people will find you. If you're creating a type of art, be it music or writing, whatever it might be, if you're doing something like that, other people will find you. And so where I may not have millions and millions of people reading the book at this point, I do have thousands of people that seem to like it. And I've got a couple hundred people that are amazing. These beautiful people that I have, these readers that I have, anytime anything I put out, they share it with everybody. They say, you got to read this series. Those are your advocates. So again, I don't have millions and millions of people talking about it. I don't have a huge publishing house that is coming to me and saying, let's blast this out there like the new Deadpool movie. But I've got these super readers, a couple hundred super readers that do everything they can to tell everything about my book. And I'm not paying them. They're just passionate about the story. That's beautiful. That's brilliant. For one, it feels really nice to have people that really embrace that. For two, they're sort of rooting me. I don't even know them. I mean, I know them in a little bit with exchanges, but they go out there because they love the story and they're champions for the book. And you might want to say you expand it off. And I think they're champions for the brand. And that's not prescribed. That came from me being true to myself, writing a story I liked. And then that person over there and that person over there, they're like, that's me. I'm into that sort of thing. And they embrace that. And then they go out there become advocates for you. And it's been really a lovely experience. It really has been amazing and heartening to see people that really have taken this story into their lives a bit and champion the book out there. It's really nice.
Well, thank you. And again, you're touching on a huge component of how people should see themselves when they put things out. And really, you're right. I mean, it's not about how many followers you have. Yeah, I mean, today, that's how we qualify people, right? Like, this is a good, this is a bad. But really about that experience, about the people that you touch. And I, in our shows, we always say this, especially when we do the mental health shows and things, we just want to, hopefully impact one person at a time. If we can change somebody's life to a positive and one, download or listen, whatever, that's already success.
I'll tell you a quick story. And this is a bit of an aside. Is I got an email from a woman, and if I think about it too hard, I'll start getting misty. But this woman emailed me and thanked me for writing the first book because she said I was going through a really, really difficult time. It was a tough time at work. My father was very sick. And she said, I knew every night I'd be able to come home and Kane and Imelda would be there for me. And she said, that was my solace. And she just wrote me, and it was, I mean, what an amazing thing that you could provide to somebody. This complete stranger saying how horrible her day was and difficult it was, but a couple hours every single night she came home, she got lost into this world I created, and it made her life just a little bit better. There's no greater gift in the world I've ever received than somebody saying something like that. How amazing is that you've provided that solace for somebody, and I treasure it.
Well, and that's a beautiful feeling. I can share that feeling because I know that when you put something out that has some sort of a message that is good. I mean, even this, we're talking about motivation, for aspiring, folks that want to do whatever success in their lives. This, just listen to this, can give them the hope, the stamina, the energy to really keep up and not give up on whatever they're planning to do. Yeah. It's a long road, guys. The journey is never easy. But don't give up. Believe in yourself. Do it for the love of what you do, and no matter what it is, it's going to continue. And don't expect immediate results. And they will happen. It only won't happen when you stop and you give up. That's it. Right. And that's all there is. And you're right. You'll get those stories where someone's like, "I love your stuff," and that's okay. And by the way, don't do it for that, because I don't do it like, I want to be like the star. Hey, Hurricane. It's not really what it started for. It's really a mission.
And it's funny because it wasn't, she was saying thank you to me, but she was more saying thank you to the characters. You know what I mean? It was like, these are friends of mine. And it's just like, and it was almost like she was writing to Kane and Imelda in that fashion. But, and there's a lot of people that are listening right now. You and I spoke about this briefly before we started today, is there's plenty of excuses to not do something. There's plenty of excuses to stop. There's tons of them. There's thousands of them. You have to find the reasons to keep going. And it's the people that keep going. That's where you're going to find your success. I've had plenty of things along the way try to knock me down. Heck, I had one yesterday trying to take my legs out. And you keep pushing through. You keep pushing through. And, there's the fourth book has now come out in the series. But I've done all this. I spoke about this a moment ago. I've done all this with narcolepsy, and narcolepsy is I guess I viewed it as a challenge in the beginning, let's say. So narcolepsy is a condition where I'm tired all the time. And as I'm speaking right now to you and to Hurricane, as I'm speaking, I have to focus on what I'm saying. And you might have heard me a couple of times when I was telling a bit of a story, whatever, I get kind of wandered off. That's because my brain just drifts away because I'm in this sleepy state most of my time. Somebody compared narcolepsy and said, and this is somebody else's, explanation of it. They said, stay up for 36 hours, now go to work. Now come home and make dinner for the family, and now sit down and have a conversation with your spouse. And that's what being a narcoleptic is like, because you're super tired all the time. When I first was diagnosed with narcolepsy, I was a little bit jaded with it. Like, why do they explained a lot of things, because I was like, oh, that's why I feel this way. I've got this thing that makes me tired all the time. It's this, they think it's an autoimmune disorder. But then I started to realize that I'm a weird dude. I come up with weird stuff all the time. And then I started to realize, like, so do you know when you're lying down going to bed, right? Like, you're about to go to sleep and you get this thought in your head, you get this idea in your head, whatever it might, you think, that's an amazing idea. I should write that down. I gotta remember that for the morning. And then you fall asleep, you wake up the next day and you don't remember it. And you didn't write it down. You didn't put it anywhere. That state, I'm in that state 80% of my day. That dream wake state, I'm in that state. And I think that actually is a flow of creativity for me. So these days I see this condition, narcolepsy, as a superpower. I see it as something that I can use in my life to create stories. Yes, is it frustrating to get tired? Yes. Do I get angry about it? Do I cry about it? You're damn right I do, because it's really frustrating. But I also see it as something that helps me build creativity. And when I open myself up to it and I let that come in, I create some pretty unusual stories that people seem to like. So yeah, over the years, in the beginning, like I said, I saw it as something that could be something like, you know what, I can't do the writing thing. Of course I can't. I work 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. I can't get up and write stories because I have narcolepsy. But where I was tired all the time. But what I did, especially with this last series, because up until this past December, I was doing 60 hours a week at my job. And that's a long day, man. That is a 12-hour day starting at 7 a.m. and going till 7:30 at night. It's the only way I could get what I wanted done. The only way I could get these books behind me, for people watching the video, to get these written is by getting up at 3 o'clock, 3:15, and making it happen for myself. And I easily could have said to myself, I can't, I've got narcolepsy. I can't do that. I'm too tired to do that. And I was like, just do it anyhow. So yeah, but you've got narcolepsy. You're too tired. I'll have a cup of coffee. I have 10 cups of coffee and do it anyhow. And now I'm writing full time. And yeah, like I said, there's so many reasons to not do that thing you really love. I saw this amazing story in the last 24 hours where somebody said, one of the biggest fears we have is the fear of success, because you've got to go out there and try. And if you give yourself those hurdles, if you turn around and say, I can't do it because, well, then I never really tried, so I never really failed. So I didn't really fail, it's just I never could do it because everything got in the way. So there's this fear that if we keep chasing after our dream, if we keep striving to find that thing, we may fail a bit. Yeah, you're going to fail a lot. But when you succeed, you're going to succeed on your merits. And you just got to keep pushing through. It's harder to do it that way. And as we're saying, you can find plenty of reasons not to do it. And that might make you in some way feel a little bit good because you never really failed. But you can never really succeed either in that thing you really love unless you go out there and really try and push it.
Well, thank you. And it's funny. This whole dilemma of failing versus succeeding is very common in the thought process. Right? Yet failing is success. To me, that's how I define it. You can't. There's no success without failure.
100%.
And really, failure is not really failing. Failure is just learning how not to do things or how to improve things. So it's just a way you have to think about it. And you're right, it is a big stop, for people. Like, it's really a big, I guess, inhibitor of people proceeding with whatever they have, because they think that this is going to be too hard. What about if I lose this? What? You don't know that. You just got to keep at it. I mean, and by the way, it's never going to be you start a plan, it's going to change a few times. I'm sure you as a writer, you write things and you scrap them, write them again, and you switch this.
Man, every single book I sit down to, I just started book 5, the last book in this Kane series. I just sat down to write book 5. Every single time I write a book, and writers will get this, or if you just started writing, you'll get this. every single time I start the book, in the first probably third of the book, I always say to myself, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm no good at this. I'm a terrible writer. Every book. And now, at least on book 13, at least I know that's coming. At least I know that's good. That, I get myself some donuts or something because I'll feel a bit better. I don't know what it is, but I know that's going to happen. And I know the first draft is going to kind of suck. They just do. Just go out there. And I always tell people, especially new writers, just get your clay. Just get beginning, middle, and end. It's not going to be great, but you're putting all your clay together, and then just get it finished. There's something about putting the end, even on a big turd, putting the end on something. It's a sense of accomplishment. Get that done. And then and this is for writers or want to be writers, get that done. Get the end in there. Get yourself an arc of a story. Don't just write a page and say the end. That's not enough. But write your arc of a story, even if it's not all going to be stuff you're going to keep. You get the end, get your big pile of clay there, and then it's in the next subsequent edits where you start to chip away at the pieces and make it better. And I know that sounds daunting, but I've actually really grown to love the editing process because as you're writing, this might just be me, but as I'm writing, my subconscious says, put this in. It's like, really? Yeah, no, that'd be good. That makes total sense. It's like, I don't know why that makes sense. And then you start editing, and I've had people come back to me and they'll say stuff like, that's how you connected that. And then it became this. And then later on became this. How do you even do that? It's like, wow, it takes, it's a process. And I get credit for it. But no, it's my subconscious somehow has worked out all those little bits and pieces come together. Yes, you've got to make sure everything makes sense in the edit. But there's plenty of times. I had something in the Hell Inc. series. The first 3 books of the series, there was some element in there, and I had no idea why it was in there. My head kept saying, yeah, put it in there, put it in there. By book 8, by book 4, and I revealed it later on. But by book 4, I finally went, oh my gosh, I know what that's for. And then I look back and go like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that little element all makes sense. And so I'm a big believer in the subconscious working out stuff for us. And I trust it.
It's 80%. I mean, subconscious is working probably more than the conscious. I mean, that's just.
I think you're right.
Just happening in the back. Well, actually, I've asked that question to psychiatrists and and hypnotherapists, and it is real. I mean, it's as powerful as people need to know. It's your subconscious does a lot of element in our world, and it takes everything, it cooks everything in the back, and it's all brewing, and you don't even know things happening. Like sometimes you get these ideas, this stuff, but it's already things that you've been exposed to, and your mind is kind of like, working. I mean, you said it. I mean, you want, and especially with your condition, you feel asleep and you want to write this stuff. I actually have the same thing. Like if I'm going and I get an idea, I'll get up and just write it down. Because you're right. If you don't in the morning, it's like, what the hell was that? And it's like, sometimes it comes back a couple of days later. Sometimes it's gone. It's over, right? Yeah. Unless there's a trigger.
And there's a fun element in the series because because they're from 2 different perspectives in the series. And so you've got Imelda, who is this former criminal who Kane ends up hiring. There's an explanation why he has a bit of money, but Kane, this man who used to be a wolf and now turns into a werewolf and dogs every now and then, as he's looking for this cure so he can become a wolf again, he's hired this former criminal named Imelda. She used to be like a getaway driver and stuff, and he needs somebody who could drive because he doesn't know how to drive. So it's in 2 parts. And why I bring this up is because some of the stuff that people really love about this story is I do it from her perspective and then Kane's perspective. And since he was an animal, he picks up on cues from people. So when he's speaking with somebody, he doesn't necessarily hear the words they say, but also notices, because in the animal world, they don't use words, they use expression or a little twitch, or, there might be a hesitation. And that's the language of animals. And so that is on that, like we're saying, on that subconscious level in a way. So some of the fun stuff as I write and kind of like going all in on my subconscious to work stuff out, that kind of manifests in this character with Kane to where he's using sort of his interpretation of micro expressions and some of the subconscious cues that somebody gives you. And he's using that. He doesn't always necessarily get it right, which a lot of the humor comes from. But I always find that sort of, like you said, 80% working on the background. I really feel more and more I'm relying on that as I get older. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about it called Blink. Basically, within the first couple of seconds, when you meet somebody or if you first see a problem, that your instinct, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, your instinct about a person or a situation that we're bred to work this out really fast, because when we didn't, we died 100,000 years ago. So our instincts actually are really good. They get tainted a bit as we sort of like our society grows and there's all nuance. But for the most part, that's where you got to trust your instincts a bit. And that's what the subconscious is. It's saying, avoid this person. You know, when you meet somebody like, this person doesn't feel right, you're usually right. You usually discover later on, this is a snake. This is not somebody I want to be hanging around at all. No, it doesn't always work. And I've had, before I got married, I had plenty of dating scenarios where I read it wrong entirely. But I might have been reading something else, not necessarily all the things I should have been. But yeah, no, I'm a huge believer in the subconscious. I think it's really important. We should be paying more attention to it.
And it is affected daily by everything that we see and hear. I mean, it's constantly bombarded with information. You just, it sits there and it stays brewing in the back, and sometimes manifests, sometimes not. Sometimes there are triggers, and it's just amazing. I mean, we've had a few shows about hypnosis and how that plays, and it's all in the mind. It's all in there, and these things work. Magic. I mean, magic is a little whooshy word, but really it is, it's the closest, the description here. It changes dynamics on how things are, right, and perspective. And you're right, this thing about instinct, this thing about sensation, feelings about others, or like conditions and circumstances, that's real too. And again, right, trust that gut feeling. I mean, it's as fact as there's that thing with sensation, good or bad. You got to trigger it somehow, and your body is kind of feeling manifest. And there's energies. That's the other thing. I mean, we can talk about that world too. I mean, there's a lot of things. You go into a room, there's an energy that feels right. You go in a room or a neighborhood or whatever, you can feel like, oh, this is off. Same thing about anything. You can get just from a voice of someone like, oh, I get energized here. So I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is going on here? I mean, it could be anything. So it's an important thing. But yeah, I want to just to touch on something that you stated about the idea of the achievement, right? A lot of people, sometimes they just don't see that, as, feasible. And it's like, they hear other people. There's a lot of naysayers. That's one thing I wanted to address. Folks, if you believe in what you're doing, don't worry about what the rest of people are going to say. Take feedback. There's nothing wrong with that. Feedback is always good. But there are a lot of people that would not want you to do what you're doing, or they won't see it your way because they haven't thought about it. And the default is like, well, that's not going to work. Oh, well, who do you think you are? There's plenty of you. And you're going to hear all kind of reasons why. Again, talked about person putting the reasons, but sometimes we have all these other blockades that come in from different angles. And, you get, even talking about earlier social media, you get a bad comment and you're like, it kind of puts you down. Like you feel like, oh, yeah, don't buy into that. Okay. You know what you're doing. You keep doing. That's it. I mean, and that's really a good, practice. Someone can send you the bad vibes. Okay. It's their opinion. That's it. But don't let people derail your, vision. You have a vision. You're not anybody watching. You're doing something for a reason. Keep doing it. And don't let all these other dynamics affect it. If it's not going to affect it positive, yeah.
And it sounds like your mom or dad telling you, but I really believe this. When somebody is being negative towards you, especially on social media, it's not usually about you. It really isn't. It's something happening in their own space. Mm-hmm. So when they come out and they're attack, like I sent something, this was a little while ago on another project. I sent something out of some promotional material, and somebody came back and was criticizing it for this particular reason. And I wrote them back and I said, that's not why I wrote that line. And I'm being cagey, but I don't want to give anything away. But that's not why I was presenting it that particular way. That wasn't something that was meant to be mean or anything. And I'm not a mean person. And then they wrote back and they said, well, this, and my experience is, and this, and I have this in my background. I was like, oh, okay. So this is all about you.
yeah,
but and I could have been negative about it, and I could have shot in the back, said, well, screw you. I don't believe in this and all the stuff you're saying. And I think you're a jerk, whatever it might be. But I was kind with them. And I said, give me some stuff to think about. And then when they came back to me, you realize that this is something that really is coming from them. And so anytime I see negativity on social, and I don't see a lot of it myself because I don't attract that sort of thing. But that I'm not saying that I because what I'm doing doesn't attract. It's just the nature maybe of the age of the people that read my books. I don't really know, but I don't see a lot of it. But I see plenty of people that do get into it. And there's a guy that I know, he's an author as well. And he gets really aggressive because he's kind of political in some ways. What man? That's probably why I don't, see a lot of negativity, because I don't get political for the most part. But he does get political, and so he'll have somebody that'll leave a bad review on some of his stuff, and his view of this is like he loves bad reviews as much as he loves good reviews, because somebody might say something like, I can't stand this book because it does this, this, and this, and I'll never read this guy again. The thing is, somebody will read that negative review, go, actually, that second one, I like that second one that he's talking about in this review. I might read it because that negative review said something that I kind of like, that I want to check out. So yeah, so he takes a look at negative input. He takes a look at people that are slamming the stuff he does as just as much as a positive as the positives.
Curiosity killed the cat, right? So when you throw in something,
Sure.
like that, like, oh, what the hell is that? Let me find out. I mean, you see it in some even videos and things. They're throwing something off, like, oh, I want to check this out. Like, it looks like, interesting. And it's like, it's completely the opposite. But that's really it. I mean, again, there's different ways to really angle these things. But at the end of the day, if you have a drive, you have a vision, you have a motivation to go and proceed doing something, just do it, folks. As long as it's
Because you stick to it.
Stick to it. That's it. I mean, that's the other thing. You mentioned something earlier about, people don't never start, right?
Yeah.
And that's really the thing. People are so afraid that they want everything fully ready, prepared, planned, right? Folks, it will never be that. I have not seen a scenario. Maybe if there's one, please reach out. I would love to have you on the show if you've started and everything was perfect from day one. But that would be like a good example to give. But it's going to be also the exception, because the majority, that's not the case. You start, and you start working it. I mean, your first book, your first show, your first, movie acting, your first, theater stuff, your first song, it may not be a hit. You know how many people have played and, put music out there and whatever they did. Takes a lot of stuff. And talking about editors and talking about people to see a talent, there are a lot of talented people everywhere, and they're not discovered every day, or they're not actually shown every day. Some do, some don't. There's different dynamics. But the fact is, just don't think about what happens to the others. Just keep doing your thing and you will happen. You also mentioned something that's funny, but not funny, something that's important to realize is that when you write those books and you edit them, right, you change them and you stuff, everybody's experienced that. How many times you write a text or message or an email.
Sure.
And you start it, and then like by the time you finish, it's a whole different email. I mean, you start reading it again. I'm like, oh shit, that's not it. That's not what I meant. This is going to be weird. Now, your mind is saying things. What you type in may be something different, and you're like, that's not what I meant. And then you keep changing.
Right.
You keep changing. We all experience these things, folks. So again, these are real things that affect us, and it's really proper and great for ourselves to always believe in yourself. Don't doubt. If someone is negative, don't surround yourself with negative. Try to get as far as possible from these folks. But you're not going to be immune to these things. They're going to happen. You can control it to a level, but don't let it touch your focus. You will make it. That's all you have to believe in. I'm going through this. No matter what happens, it's going to happen, and you will. You started with one book. You're on 13, and I know that you're going to keep going on that journey, and that's all there is. And everyone out there, you can do the same. I mean, look at all the greats. If you go back to their history, you'll be like shocked on how many obstacles and no's and doubts that they've gone through, and potential really even getting to a point of really just giving up. Yet they just didn't do it. They keep up with it. They continue, and that's really the concept, folks. So again, I just wanted to add that piece, because those are things that I picked up from your message there. But so let's talk about the books, and so they are available. This is the new series, Gain. On Amazon.
The fourth book came out on the 23rd of April. So it's available on Amazon, and it's available for Kindle Unlimited. And like I said, it's a fun story. It's I never set out to write a monster book, and I wouldn't qualify it as a monster book. It's really about two very different people, this Imelda and Cain. You can't get anywhere different. One used to be a wolf, but two very different people that kind of didn't fit in the world so much. Imelda, like I said, is this former criminal, maybe not so former. And here's Cain, who was a wolf, became human. And actually, there's a bit of a fun part where for his first years of his life, although he grew very quickly, he was raised by this French-Canadian couple. That's why he's French-Canadian, right? He was raised by this French-Canadian couple in British Columbia. And so he learned about being human to a large extent by learning from this older couple. And he spent a year with them and then ended up striking out, as I said, because he's got to return home. He wants to return to his pack. And so it's about really the stories about these two very different people that don't quite fit into the world. These are square pegs into the round holes of the world. And they come together and they find that even though they're just friends, it's not a romantic sort of thing, but they're just friends. But they find when they're together that they're sort of greater than the sum of their parts, that together they're a pretty great team together. And I think there's a lot of that in the world when you find people that sort of get your groove and how that helps you get through life. Like my wife, I couldn't do anything without her. She and me are the pack of two in my life. And I couldn't imagine doing any of this without her by my side, and that matters the world to me. And so there's that sort of theme within this story, these two people that are a bit kind of broken, don't fit in, they come together and it just sort of works. And again, they're just friends, but they sort of make this work, and they take on monsters for goodness sake as they're searching for this cure for Cain, so you become a wolf again. And it's fun. It's actually been fun to write from his perspective because, like I mentioned, that there are chapters where we see through his eyes, that's in first person, and how he views the world. And so there's a lot of humor in there. But then there's also like a number of my readers will pitch the sort of dogs he should turn into. Like I've got book 5 I'm writing right now, the final book in the series. And I'm getting all these pitches left and right from all these readers saying, put mine in there, put mine here. And then they got to tell me why it would be fun to have that kind of dog in there. So, but he turns into a pug, which was really popular. He turns into a poodle, turns into a Rottweiler, turns into all these various dogs. So it's been a real fun series to write and then sort of grow his character along the way, and seeing how these characters develop. That's been a real great joy for me because, like I said, I don't orchestrate it so much. I start to get to know the characters and they start to speak through me a bit. And so even I get sort of surprised sometimes at some of the choices they make. And I know that sounds flaky nuts, but when you really get your characters down, you're sort of their first reader in a way. And that's how it is for me as a process. So like I said, I've got the 4th one I just published on ebook and paperback. And the first 3 books, if you're an audiobook listener, the first 3 books have been released already on Podium, on Audible by Podium Audio. So check those out if you're an audiobook listener. And I'd love to hear from anybody. And if there's anybody out there that's getting into writing or wants any sort of conversation about writing, I'm always open. Just hit me on my Facebook page or shoot me an email, whatever it might be. And I'm always up for giving any sort of guidance to the stuff I've screwed up on the past to help you guys out.
Well, thank you so much. Now, I was going to ask about the audio part, but yeah, thank you. Because I mean, some people, they just don't have time to sit and grab a book, but it's easier. You're doing whatever you're doing, you listen to it, and actually, it's pretty. My wife is big with audiobooks, so she's like doing her thing, and she's always listening. And I wanted to just congratulate you and your wife for being that pack up to you, and you're again, that never fails. I mean, a lot of successes are part of are driven by that unity. And when you have someone that is supportive, your support system is always important. And I know it takes a lot of sacrifice from parties. I mean, I would say the same about my wife. I mean, she's on my corner, I'm on hers, and we work as a tag team, and that's a big deal. And by the way, I wanted just to relate to something you said. You said you had some bad things or whatever obstacles yesterday or something that happened. We all going through stuff. I'm actually going through stuff. My mom is in the hospital as we speak, and it's just no, it is what it is. Live, I mean, but you're right. Things. I mean, it throws me off, but you got to continue, and wish for the best and so on and so forth. But life has got to throw these things and these, real test runs, for you and see how you're gonna, I guess prevail. I mean, it's not easy, but you got to make it work. And it is important to always acknowledge these folks that are with you in the journey,
right?
And if you have some of those folks with you in life, and you should have, surround yourself with some. And if you have a spouse, a significant other, those are your first go-to people, and they're the ones who can make or break things. And if they stand by you, good, bad, ugly, you're gonna make it work. And yeah, that's about it. So
and I know we're wrapping up, but I would say let them know too. I've always wanted to write a story, and this might have been done in the past, because it's only at the funeral. I'm not trying to be morose or anything, but where people start to just talk about how amazing a person is. Like, you could have mentioned that yesterday when they were alive, because there's a lot of amazing things you're saying about that person right now that they're not necessarily hearing, or they might be hearing from a different place. And so I've always wanted to do like a part of a story. And again, I haven't yet because it might have been done already. But basically, somebody starts a service where they do like pre-funerals, so you can actually lie in a coffin and hear people just gush about you, because that'd be really nice to hear. But so why I sort of mentioned this idea is because I was speaking to another podcaster that I've known this person for some 30 years. And I just told him, I said, and I just had a moment where I was like, listen, you should know this. You're something in my life. I said, well, you and I don't talk every day, every week, every month, even every year, but you're somebody who, when I go back and define my life, you're a part of it. You're part of what defines me. The relationship you and I have defines me. And I was just speaking the truth to him, and that meant a lot to him. And I didn't say it to make him feel good. It was the truth, and I felt that I had to tell him that. I think that, and it's harder for guys sometimes to say that sort of thing, but I realized how much that meant to him and means to me. So I think sometimes we do have to slow it down a bit and do that pre-funeral thing. It's like, hey, I haven't said this to you in a long time, or maybe never, but you really matter to me. You're somebody that's important to me, and my life is better having you in it. That's really valuable. And right now, there are so many people that are feeling awful right now. There are so many people that are feeling really down with the way the economy and politics and the world is going. It wouldn't be bad every now and then if we reach out to each other and told each other how much we matter to each other. And I would recommend that, because it pays off in dividends.
Well, thank you so much. That's a so much powerful message right there, because you're right. I'm a true story. I had this coworker that I've known for years, on and off. We were working together. He was one of my first mentors, and then we kind of separated, and we worked as a team in a different place or a couple other places, and then we separated for a while. We were connected just on social, and kind of like, then one day I get this message: I'd like you to be in this particular party. I'm only recognizing some people that touched my life, that were great in my life. It was
Okay.
we were about 6 or 7 people, and I was like, why me? I mean, literally, I was, it was weird to just, because we know a lot of people together, but
Right.
being touched that way. I mean, it was a unique experience to feel it, and you don't know who you touch. That's the thing. In life, we have
Right.
no idea what impact we have on others. So, but you're right. Telling someone, and it was so great to hear that. Like, really, I met
100%.
something special to this particular person, and I guess the reverse is true, because that made me feel greater, goods towards him, and warm, feelings towards him, because I mean, I've liked him, all along, but I thought it was just a limited co-worker relationship, that, but it turned out to be more for him, and just do, again, you said it, dividends, baby. You put in out stuff, good stuff, he'll come back. You will never know when it's going to happen, and when it's going to happen, how and from whom, but just do it. There's nothing wrong with that. Just keep putting some positivity out there.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, you're right. We're about to wrap it up, but just any last words of wisdom to our audiences today?
Yeah, thanks, man. I really enjoyed the time today. If people are interested in any of the books, go check them out. As I mentioned, on Amazon, and like we mentioned a moment ago, they're on Audible. And there's more to come. There's one more final book in the series, and I've got another series planned. So, no, it's been a real pleasure being on the show with you today, man.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, so folks, again, I'll have the link where you can get those books as well, and the website. So you should have the website in front of my screen here. It's pretty cool, so check it out. And yeah, I mean, folks, this is cool stuff. And I know the story is going to be intriguing, because just listen to you kind of reverse the whole thing about werewolves. I mean, you reverse the concept, like how it is usually. Not a
Mhm.
human is a werewolf versus. So this is going to be a cool thing, and I like the dynamic, the duo dynamic that you have there. So, I think it's going to be an interesting story to read. I think I'm interested in myself, to get into the audible part of it, and listen. I will, and frankly, thank you so much for really doing the work you do, and just for being also on the show, and you've shared quite a bit of important things. And I want to also say that you've done all this with the condition that you mentioned, narcolepsy, and that's the thing. Like, for everyone out there, guys, let's drop the excuses, no matter what. things are going to happen. Just keep at it, And again, I mean, it's a reiterating of the message that we stated earlier, but it's just amazing to know that tough things happen and yet you can make it happen through them. So thank you for that. That's a very big message, that I think if anything today, we should all, adhere to and listen to and maybe, share with the world. So thank you so much. All
Great. Thank
right.
you.
You're welcome. Well, that being said, folks, this is the end of the show. We'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic. I'm Eric Age. Bye for now.